Bitch is a Bad Word podcast is for informational purposes only and reflects the opinions of the host and guests. It contains explicit content and discusses sensitive topics such as domestic abuse, sexual assault, and violence, which may be distressing to some listeners. Please take care of your emotional well-being while listening. While we strive for accuracy, we make no warranties about the completeness or reliability of the information, and any reliance on it is at your own risk. We do not endorse third-party views and are not liable for any defamatory claims. Listeners should conduct their own research and consult professionals before making decisions. If you or someone you know is in danger, please call 911 or contact the National Domestic Abuse Hotline 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 800-799-7233 or text START, S-T-A-R-T, to 88788. We've got your back, besties. Caliber Studios has not independently verified the information you're about to hear. Reality isn't always what it seems. It's what you make of it. Sons of Anarchy actress Ali Walker debuts her electrifying new thriller, The Light Runner, on June 6th at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but our bestie gang can pre-order it now at aliwalkerofficial.com. She's a baddie, she's your new bestie, and we've got her back. Go visit her website, aliwalkerofficial.com, and pre-order The Light Runner now. Welcome back to this episode of Bitch is a Bad Word. We have your new bestie joining us. Leslie Morgan Steiner is here to share her experiences in domestic abuse and her journey of turning pain into purpose. Welcome to Bitch is a Bad Word.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
I am such a fan. I think that your storytelling, your book writing, and then your advocating work is so inspirational. And you're doing so much for so many women. It's beautiful.
Well, Lindsay, thank you for saying that. It's a real honor to do this work, and it's really healing and wonderful for me too. And not anything that I planned on doing. You know, when I was like a little girl growing up, wanting to be a writer when I was a grown-up, I didn't know this is the story I'd be telling, but honestly, I really love telling it, even though that's even hard to understand. Like, how can I love talking about such a terrible subject? But it's just, I believe really fiercely that breaking the silence is the way that we heal from all kinds of abuse. And I'm really profoundly grateful to be doing this work.
Well, we're profoundly grateful for you to be doing this work. And, you know, the question that gets asked way too many times, and that just sort of really just chaps me where I don't want to be chapped, is why did she stay? So how many times in your life have you been asked, why did you stay?
So, more times than I can count. And it filled me with rage before I wrote Crazy Love and before I did my TED Talk. And it really fueled me to write the book and to do the TED Talk, because I wanted people to understand, like in their bones, why we stay in abusive relationships and why that question is a huge part of the problem. Because the question is really very victim blaming, because it's saying you stayed because you're stupid, or you had no self-esteem, or you thought too poorly of yourself. And nobody has ever asked me why my husband beat me. They always put the focus on me and on other victims. Why did you stay? Not, how could anybody be so twisted and distorted that they would hurt the person who loved him most in the world? It's still hard for me to understand. And it's another reason why I still do this work, is there are a lot of people that I'd like to try to educate on why it's such a twisted question to ask.
It is such a twisted question because and victim shaming is so real, and it's happening everywhere, where it's like, oh, she must have stayed for the money, or she did this for this, or, all the reasons where you're like, no, that I have to ask you, You were in love with your husband, I would imagine. Part of the issue is you have a family. Part of, tell me, like, let's start at the beginning.
I have never loved anybody as much as I loved him. We met right after I graduated from Harvard, and I was working at 17 Magazine in New York. I hadn't dated much at all in college. I was really kind of naive, even though I was smart and empowered and ambitious, and I had a great job and was like tackling New York City like, a house of fire. But when I met him, I was dating a bunch of guys, and they were all interesting and fun, and I just really fell hard for him really quickly, which is kind of a hallmark of an abusive relationship. Hands down, he was the smartest, most interesting, and kindest person I knew. And I always say he was 49% the greatest man I'd ever known and 51% the most troubled. He'd been terribly abused as a child, viciously beaten and really tortured by his stepfather. And I just didn't know much about abuse at all. I didn't know that it had left such deep scars on him. And I actually, when he told me about the abuse, it made me love him even more, because I was so proud of him that he'd escaped it and he'd gotten an Ivy League degree himself and, was really pulling himself forward into the world. So yeah, I really, really loved him. And that is why I stayed. I think that the psychological powers of love and denial create a vicious trap that keeps victims. And then when you add on top of that, children, financial dependency, cultural pressure, immigration status, all of those other factors, it becomes even harder to leave. Now, I didn't really have any of those other things. I just largely had the fact that I purely loved him and wanted to help him. I'd been raised to be that kind of woman, one who cared and nurtured for the men in my life, and that I got a lot of self-esteem and strength from being a strong, smart, independent woman who was helping heal him. And I was really like the last one to know that he was abusing me and manipulating me and using my own finest qualities to trap me in a relationship with him. And that's why my book is called Crazy Love, because it was crazy and it felt like love.
So you say he took your finest qualities, and this is like what we're understanding and what we're learning more about now that more people are speaking up and using their voices and not being so silent. These types of people take your most endearing, amazing qualities. And at the beginning, what we're understanding is that they're taking an inventory, if you will, of you and who you are, and like maybe, mirroring showing you what you want to hear. And then they can flip that switch so quickly and turn everything about you that they loved into the thing that they discard. So in your relationship, when it started, how quick did it progress from meeting him to, with like, we're hearing this love bombing, we're hearing all these terms. How does it look like in your relationship?
So we were involved, intensely involved for a year and a half before he ever hit me. And it wasn't a fairy tale the whole time. It was really good at the beginning. And it's exactly as you described, Lindsay. He saw me. He saw everything about me. And there was nothing more intoxicating than being seen and loved and cherished and appreciated for just who I was. No one had ever seen me the way he saw me. And he slowly and gradually, so that I really didn't notice, introduced isolation into the equation. He gradually isolated me from my friends and my family and my coworkers at 17. And he started undermining my perception of reality. He was a genius, and he was a genius at what he did. But I have to say that when I talk about how he did this to me, every domestic violence victim, male or female, of any age, any education, any ethnicity, understands what I'm talking about. This is what they do to us. So he started doing things like saying, look, you grew up in such a kind of privileged way, in a sort of a naive way, and I love you more than anybody has ever loved you, and I want to protect you and take care of you. So I'm going to tell you the truth. And the truth is, you dress a little slutty sometimes. And I know you don't realize this, but you're getting the wrong kind of attention. So your skirts should be longer. And you should wear a little bit less makeup. And you look really cute when you're wearing like my oversized sweaters and things. Like he just sort of like crept in. And, you know, I was working at a New York fashion magazine. I
was just about to say, you're working at like the number one magazine, like, and that was my favorite magazine. You couldn't stop me from buying that.
I know. And it was a great place, and it was dedicated to helping teenage girls. It still is. And here he is getting me to wear his like oversized LL Bean wool sweaters and long skirts under the guise of it being that he was protecting me from men and from things that I was just too naive to understand. And he did a lot of things like that. And it just slowly kind of took over my life. And I'd never been loved like that. So, and I'd never trusted a man like that. And he laid the trap really carefully so that I did completely trust him and believe him. And I loved being close to him. We were really, really close at the beginning and when times were good. And I would have done anything to keep that. And I did. He wanted me to quit my job at 17 and move to a tiny town in New England so that he could get away from his abusive biological family. I did all that. I gave up my financial independence, my psychological independence. I gave up everything I'd worked my whole life for because he was my soulmate. And what he was giving me in terms of the intoxication of being close to him and of meaning so much to a man who I respected so much it was worth anything to me. And it's only looking back now that I see that wasn't love, and that I wish I had been able to say no. If you really love me, you'll understand that I want to keep this job and I want to stay in New York, and that I don't need to, stop having male friends. And I don't need to stop wearing makeup, and that I get to still be myself and be loved for who I am. I wish I had been able to do that, but I wasn't at that age. And, now I am. I've learned the hard way. But it's not a surprise that the most common time in a woman's life to be an abuse victim is between the ages of 16 and 24, which is, I was right in that sweet spot. I was 22 when I met him, because I just didn't know enough about relationships and about what it takes to be happy in a relationship over time. I didn't know really the nature of true love. And I hadn't had many examples in my own family life or in anything. I mean, we don't get a lot of examples of healthy love in our society. So it wasn't my fault. And I also, over the years since I published Crazy Love and I did my TED Talk, I have talked and emailed and texted with thousands and thousands of abuse victims, abuse survivors. And the, men, women, people who could barely write a sentence, right up there with neurosurgeons who speak, 7 languages. What everybody who's a victim of abuse has in common, as far as I can tell, is that we have these really big hearts. We're very forgiving people. And that is what these predators look for. And the night that my husband and I met, we met on the New York City subway, and he told me much later that the first thing he noticed about me is that as the train emptied out, I didn't move away from him. I was sitting right next to him. And, the protocol in the subway is that you're supposed to move away from a stranger. And I didn't, because I was afraid of hurting his feelings. And he said he noticed that, and he really liked that about me. So you're really right there, taking an inventory, consciously or unconsciously, about who has a big enough heart for them to treat really terribly and be forgiven again and again. And that was me.
I met him at my daughter's college graduation. I pictured being in a fight with him. He was my daughter's boyfriend. 20 days later, he took her life when she tried to break up with him. When Dating Hurts is the name of my podcast. I knew I could not bring Kristen back, but believed I could help others who became tangled up in dating abuse and domestic violence. My guests are domestic violence survivors. Who knows more about the toxicity, the entrapment, devious manipulation, the loneliness, the pain and suffering than brave survivors who live to tell about it? Their stories are raw, intimate, plain spoken, deeply personal. For many, this is the first time they've told their stories in one place. Today's survivors want current victims to know there are ways to achieve freedom. There is a process that's safe, that this can happen to anyone, and that you are not alone. Join me and my courageous guests on the When Dating Hurts podcast. It's a series of lives being saved.
It is chilling to hear you describe the subway. It's like a movie scene. I can picture the whole thing. I completely relate. And when you repeat that, it sounds like something I was told. You know, I got abandoned. He left me in a bar because he was mad that I was talking to the owner of the bar, who was my friend for 15 years, who happened to be a male. And when he left, I ran outside and I said, like, where are you going? And he's like, I won't put up with this. I won't be treated this way. And I'm like, treated what way? This is my friend. You know, I was coming back from the bathroom. And it got me very new. And it got me so riled up that I started crying. And later he said the same thing. He goes, I loved that when I got upset with you, like, instead of arguing with me, you cried. So now I realized what that meant, that, like, she's perfect. This is I've hit the target, and she's not going to fight back. She's going to get emotional, because I was like, I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong. I knew consciously that I didn't do anything wrong, but I was being told I was doing something wrong. So then you're like, you start that confusion, and because what they're saying you're doing and what you believe to be true are not in alignment, and it makes you start questioning your own self.
Right. It's classic gaslighting. And, you know, there are some people out there who might say that you and I and other survivors of abuse, that it's a self-esteem problem. And just like everything with domestic violence, it's a lot more complicated than that. I believe, because I've met so many people who've been through this, that we are the nicest people in the world. And we don't want to hurt people's feelings, and we want to love people, and we want to heal people. We're very, very sweet, big-hearted people. But there is a grain of truth in the fact that we tend to not be able to put ourselves first very easily. And that is the lesson that I learned from him. I believe that everybody in our life is a teacher. And the thing that Connor taught me more than anything was that I have the right to put myself first. And in fact, it's a natural order of the universe. And I'm never going to be happy in any relationship, including the relationship I have with myself, unless I put myself first. Because, you know, eventually he did start beating me. It was just like a lot of abusers. He waited until I couldn't leave. And then he started physically abusing me. He wasn't going to take any chances of me walking out the door. You know, the first beating was 5 days before our wedding. And then he beat me twice more on the honeymoon. He got guns. He started strangling me. It was really horrific. But in the final beating, he was going to kill me. I could feel it everywhere in my body. It was terrifying. And I heard this voice that said, you know, Leslie, you have a choice here. You have to choose him or you. And it's okay if you choose him, because, you know, we know you're such a good person and that you love him. But you're going to die if you choose him. He's going to kill you one day, and you have the right to choose yourself. And the only reason that I'm here today is that I did choose myself. And I tell you, it was a hard decision, and it's a decision that even now causes me some pain, because I really loved him, and I believe he is worthy of love and respect, and that he was getting it from me. But I am glad that I chose myself, and that night after I convinced him to stop, and he left the apartment, and I called the police and filed a restraining order and all of that enabled me to go on and to graduate from Wharton Business School and build a career and remarry and have children and write Crazy Love and, you know, do my TED Talk and do all these other things that mean so much to me. But I still am really sad in some ways that what I tried to do to help this wonderful, deserving man who had been really horribly abused as a kid, that he couldn't let me help him, and that I wasn't the right person to help him. In fact, I was the last person on earth who could help him, precisely because I loved him, I was the trigger. I was the one who made him feel so insecure and so afraid of being betrayed and abandoned yet again. It's this is what most people don't understand. And definitely those people who say, why didn't you just leave? This is what they don't understand, is that domestic abuse is so complicated. It's so psychologically, physically, financially, emotionally complicated. And it's culturally complicated too, because we get so many messages in every culture from the time that we're born. We women and girls get this message that our worth and our power comes from protecting and supporting and nurturing men. We get this, kind of this message that, and it's true in so many ways, that men aren't actually the strong ones, that we are the strong ones. And that our biggest, most important role is to help men survive and thrive. And I fell for that like anybody. And I'm happy to say that I learned at a relatively young age, because I left him when I was 27, that since that day I really have been able to put myself first and to live what other people would call a more selfish life, definitely a really unconventional life for a woman. And that I don't subscribe to that theology at all anymore, that patriarchal theology that my only worth is as a woman supporting a man.
Thank you for saying that out loud, because fuck the patriarchy, right? It's like it has kept women in positions that that get hurt,
Exactly.
that can't make choices for themselves, that have to, everybody, especially growing up at an age where, the Disney culture, one day your prince will come and save you. And we're not telling anyone to save your damn self and pave your own path. And you're waiting and, and you are in love with somebody and you imagine this beautiful fairy tale of if I can just love him enough, and my love can probably change him. And that's not possible, right? So when I'm in your situation too, you're like, you meet Connor, you're on this subway. He sees that you're the perfect target. And did the people in your life, the people at work, 'cause I imagine you're working with some pretty amazing, like some girl boss kind of people at 17 that are like, what the fuck are you doing? Did anybody question you why you were leaving? Did you lie? How did you make the decision to say, or how did you arrive at your resigning from the largest magazine in the world at the time?
It's such a good question. 17, the editorial staff at the time was 50 people, and 49 of them were women. And the most kick-ass women I've ever met. 17 magazine is not about learning how to put on mascara, although that is important. It's really about how you navigate adolescence, which for any girl is really treacherous, complicated. You have to deal with your sexuality, boys' sexuality, older men's sexuality, your ambition, studying, health, your body changes. I mean, there's a lot going on for teenage girls. We ask a lot of teenage girls, and 17 is committed to helping them. So the people I worked with are absolute feminists. And one of them in particular took me aside and said, Leslie, this is feminism 101. You don't quit your job and move for a man. You just don't. It's a trap. And I remember looking at her and thinking, I felt so sorry for her, that she didn't know what true love was all about, that she'd never loved anybody the way that I loved him. And it goes to show how hard it is to help somebody in that fairy tale stage of abuse, because you've already been brainwashed and you don't even know it. And, Connor worked really hard to isolate me psychologically from people like that friend at work who tried to help me, and also my family. Of course, he went after my mother first, because your mother is the person who's your fiercest protector. And my mother was getting divorced at the time from my dad. And he said, look, at some stage, your mom is really not going to like me. Because just as her dreams of romance and marriage are shattering, yours are beginning. So you just be ready for that, Leslie. So that when my mom did talk to me about how angry he was and the other red flags that she saw, I thought, he was right. Wow. He is so smart and intuitive. He knew that she was going to be like this. And, he did that again and again and again with everybody who could have helped me. So that when I really did need help, it was so hard to find people who were still in touch with me, who still believed me, who weren't angry with me. One of the things that happens that's so awful that happens to abuse victims when you're actively being abused is that your friends and family and coworkers or neighbors, they get angry at you. Mm-hmm. They don't realize that they really should be getting angry at the abuser. They get angry at the victim. It's much easier. You're an easier target. And I was incredibly fortunate that I had two friends who didn't succumb to that psychology and who were available to me when I desperately needed them. And one of them came to me first and said, I've noticed that something's changed since you've been in this relationship. And I don't know what it is, but I care about you and I need to know that you're safe. And that's all that he said. It was really incredibly deft. And I could see how worried he was. And I realized that I wasn't fooling anybody, that I was in really big trouble if this gentle, caring man could somehow see and feel what had happened to me. And then the other person who saw was my best friend from college, who was a pediatrician. And as such, she was a really caring and soft-hearted person. And she knew it was wrong, what he was doing, but she also knew that I loved him. And she treated him with a lot of sympathy. A lot of people would have said, no, you have to leave him or I can't be your friend anymore. Mm-hmm. And she said, no, I will stay by you. What he's doing is really wrong and really dangerous. But I'll be here and I'll help you no matter what. And those two people were priceless to me. I was very fortunate as a victim that I had two such intuitive, caring people who honestly, Lindsay, they were like angels in my life. And I'm so lucky that I had them. And that's another reason that I speak out now, is that I try to like carry that forward, that kind of sympathy for what a victim of abuse is going through at the time.
Because that's what they need. I mean, the isolation is real. They put you in this silo. You see the world only through the way that they're telling you and they're shaping it for you. And you're, I can just imagine that the woman at work who is telling you that you're making the wrong decision, you come home and you tell him and he's probably like, oh, she's just a lesbian who's never going to have a man. She doesn't know what a man. I mean, I was told all the time, oh, they're like, look at your dumb friends with their dumb jobs, having to pay their dumb bills. You're a kept woman. How amazing is that? And I'm like, I guess it's great. Yeah, I don't have to worry about what's in the banking account or what, When I left, I didn't even have a bank account. I had to get a co-signer on a bank account because I had been so kept. I had no idea what that term meant. And my goal in this entire world is to unkeep all the women.
Yes.
We are unkeeping you.
A wonderful goal. Yeah.
It's crazy to hear this story and in such detail, because it's like you are a dream, poster woman, right? You have achieved at Harvard, 17 magazine, New York City. It's like how your life couldn't get any more dreamlike. And then you meet this man, and then this man is meant to pair yourself with him to enhance the life, right? To be this, my world's fully and complete. And I have the job and I have the husband, and wow. So I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to walk through how you felt being beaten before the most important day of your life.
Okay.
We'll be right back, besties.
Hi, I'm Sarah Wayne Callies, and I played Dr. Sarah Tancredi on Prison Break.
And I'm Paul Edelstein, and I played Agent Paul Kellerman on Prison Break. Please join us on our rewatch podcast, Prison Breaking, with Sarah and Paul.
We're going to have all kinds of guests and never-before-told stories, so follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can subscribe to our watch party on the link there. We can't wait to see you there.
And follow us on Instagram at Prison Break Podcast. See you there.
Welcome back. We have your new BFF, Leslie Morgan Steiner, joining us today, and we are talking about how crazy love can actually be. But remember, it's not you, it's them. You are not crazy. They have just made you think this by putting you in this silo. And we were talking to Leslie about just what a girl boss she was, and just you couldn't imagine a life more exciting. And I mean, you're in your 20s and you're in New York and you're working for 17 magazine. It's like, how cool, like amazing. And then you meet this man and you're preparing for your wedding. Do you have friends at this point, or has he already isolated you?
No, I had friends. I had friends.
Okay.
I had my bridesmaids, I had my sisters, my mom, my dad, everybody.
Okay, so you were having a wedding.
Yeah, I was having a real wedding.
Okay.
And he got, it was 5 days before the wedding. So it was like a pretty tense time. And I did all the wedding planning myself. And we really were struggling financially. And there was a lot of tension. And he lost it that morning. And he got mad over nothing. And before I knew it, he wasn't beating me. He was strangling me. He had his hands around my neck. He'd been strangled a lot as a little kid. He had talked to me a lot about that. He couldn't wear ties because they were so terrifying to him. So here he is strangling me and hitting my head up against the wall, screaming at me at the top of his lungs. And I mean, I reacted as any human being would react. I was terrified, shocked and terrified. And when he was done, he threw me down and he left. So I was alone. And I knew I had to cancel the wedding. I knew it was over. I knew I had to call my mom, my dad, the police, a hotline. I mean, all the wedding guests. I knew that. Like in my bones, I knew it. I had this really terrible cold feeling in my stomach. And then I hate that this happened, but this is really what happened. My denial crept in. And denial is a very powerful psychological force. And my denial said, people say that men just get cold feet before they get married. And that's all that this is. And, Leslie, he didn't hit you. And he hadn't hit me. What he'd done was much worse, but he hadn't hit me. And I remember saying to myself, look, you are a strong, smart, independent woman. You can handle this. You love him. He loves you. You don't have to cancel anything. Go ahead and marry him. He's never going to do this again because you're his dream girl and he loves you so much and he values you so much. And he's your partner in everything. He's your equal in everything. And you trust him. So I didn't tell anybody. And I put on my mother's wedding dress. We got married in Harvard's Memorial Church. It was, early June, the sunny, beautiful day. There was a harpist playing. Like, it couldn't have been more perfect. And then he beat me twice more on the honeymoon. And, that was it. I was trapped. I was married to a man who I loved, who was really intent upon destroying me for reasons it took me a long, long time to understand. It was impossible to understand at that age and being so close to it. And it was terrifying. But then what actually was even worse, Lindsay, and I don't know if this happened to you too, is that I got so used to being beaten that it wasn't scary anymore. He held loaded guns to my head more times than I can count. And I wasn't scared. I would say to him things like, go ahead, pull the trigger. I know you can't. I know you won't. And I can't believe I said and did those things. Because he could have pulled the trigger at any moment. He could have accidentally pulled the trigger. Mm-hmm. But I just was so inured to it that I was like, yeah, come on, buddy. Like it becomes a terrible place that you're living in. Thank God I didn't have children. Because I can only imagine what it would have been like if I had been that numb and exposing children to violence like that. I mean, that would have been a tragedy of a whole nother kind of making. And that's why it was so important that I had people who broke down my denial and who helped me see, not like in a crazy, not what I would have done. What I would have done is I would have like stood up on the table and been like, you are an abused wife. You have to leave him. He's a monster. And that never works with anybody because they're not monsters. He wasn't a monster. He was a really kind and lovely, brilliant man who'd been viciously abused as a kid and who'd never dealt with it, who'd never gotten any help to deal with it. And he took it out on me. He took it out on all women who were close to him. I wasn't the first, and I certainly wasn't the last. And this is a classic case of domestic violence. But one of the things that's so confusing, which I'm sure you know, is that when it is happening to you, it feels really personal and it feels like love. And there's no understanding that this is a pattern and that this is a syndrome. And that even though you feel so alone, you're actually in incredibly good company because it's happening to strong, smart, independent women all over the globe at the exact same time as it's happening to you. And that's what ultimately really helped me too, is when I started to research and learn more about domestic violence while I was still married to him, I started to realize that this was like it was kind of like an illness that was really easy to diagnose. I had every symptom, he had every symptom, and this was domestic violence. And I was an abused, battered wife, and he was an abuser. And it was never going to get better, and the only thing I could do was to leave him. And that was of great comfort to me. And that's also what the police told me the night they came and found me, naked and covered in cuts and bruises and, at my absolute worst after that final beating. That's what they said to me, is that this was classic. They saw it all the time, and that he would kill me if I let him back. And thank God for those police officers and the domestic violence advocate and my lawyer and my therapist, all these people who really understood what I was going through and supported me. And, I think it takes a village to leave an abusive relationship. And I'm really fortunate that I still had a village in my friends and family, and complete strangers came out of the woodwork to help me.
It is a village it takes a village. Nobody will leave. Like, you weren't just beat once, you weren't just beat twice. You don't leave until you're ready. And we're trying to share with anyone who's listening that, like, hearing it and you're like, so maybe somebody in your life has called you an abused woman, and that person pissed you off when they said it. You're like, I'm not an abused woman. I was told that by my his ex-wife. And I was like, fuck you. You're jealous. I've got the life. And I was like, you're crazy. And I was so upset and I was so offended by what she had told me, because I'm also being told she's crazy and all the things that I'm being fed about her. So I think she's, public enemy number one. And we're very close now. And I remember, I remember where I was sitting, what I was wearing, and what had just happened when she told me this. And I couldn't have been more offended. And I realize now that, I have to meet women or men or wherever. I mean, my show in particular is focused on the women, but where they are, and knowing that you have to get over quite a few things. You have to get out, and you are in love with someone. So it doesn't make sense to okay, but this will just be the one time. And I want to talk about strangulation because this is what we know now is the number one precursor, right? Like, if someone has the ability to show you that they can take your breath away, they are most likely going to kill you.
Yes, the two biggest lethality risks that data has shown are strangulation and gun ownership. And I had both of them. And what I would ask anybody listening to imagine the angriest that you've ever been in your life at a friend, a partner, a child, an animal, life, another driver. Would you ever take your hands and put it around that being's throat and squeeze so tightly that they couldn't breathe? No. I've been really mad in my life, and it's never occurred to me to strangle somebody. It is a really despicable and deranged thing to do to somebody. And It felt that way to me when he did it to me, but it's even more when you imagine being the perpetrator. And I think it's important to put yourself in the shoes and say, this is who you're dealing with. This is who you, quote unquote, love. And what I realized at the end of the relationship is that I still loved him. And in some ways I still trusted him and believed in him. But what I couldn't trust was his rage. He had this rage in him, Lindsay, that is like nothing I've ever seen in my life. It took over his whole body. It would make his face and his eyes turn red. And he was like you didn't want to be anywhere around him when he was like that, because he could kill you. And I think it was the rage from being beaten as a little boy and seeing his mother being beaten by his stepfather so many times and having nobody protect him and nobody help him. And I think that's the root of domestic violence, is men who, and it's almost always men who've been beaten as kids and who grow up to be abusers. And we've got to find a way to help them and to unpack them, or we're never going to end domestic violence. And I'm all for helping victims. I think it's the most important thing that you can do. But they're so good at this, the abusers are, that we're never really going to stop this cycle unless we can identify men and get them the help that they need. Because just like you saw, they're really good at demonizing the partners that came before you. And so that like people always say, why didn't you warn other women? And first of all, Crazy Love, my book, is my warning. But also they never would have believed me, because he said to everybody, she's crazy. She's still in love with me. You know, she's really fucked up. She had this happen to her and that happened to her, all of which was true. And, you know, don't believe her. They're really good at making sure that we're not credible to anybody. It's part of the way that they protect themselves when they go on to find a new victim. And it is, yeah. And unfortunately, the family courts collude with them. Family courts are such dangerous places for abuse victims. Judges, and I've worked with so many of them, it is the very rare judge who knows anything about abuse. And so it's very easy for abusers to manipulate judges and lawyers and the family court system to get what they want.
And that's the tragic part. I mean, that's like you hear these so many stories, you know, the Tina Swithens of the world that are just, you know, out there, thank God, that are like exposing these this issue, another part of the epidemic that domestic abuse is. I love the thought, though, that when you say it's like this man and his childhood and the way he grew up, and it resonates with me because my ex had a very traumatic childhood. And so I always felt bad. Like I felt bad for him. So that's like the big heart. We're like understanding the dynamics here, right? This is what you're going to be up against. You have a big heart. You're imagining that little boy who's, you know, being beaten or drinking sugar water to live, or whatever scenario that they're going through. You imagine that person. And the same person who's raging at you, or in your situation, holding a gun to your head, you're like, if I can speak to that little boy, if I can hug him, like this guy's outside of himself. This guy is, you know, or I love that you say you were like, pull the trigger. I've been in situations where I was like, do it. And you're like, and you're screaming right back at them. Cause I'm like, I always want to say to women, like, you literally, domestic abuse doesn't have to just be that you're sitting there silently and you're getting beaten or yelled, you know, a lot of times you're pushing back. A lot of times you're like, this is insane. And you're like, but then you later feel like maybe you were part of the problem. Maybe if you had just let him have his like ragey baby meltdown, it wouldn't have gotten so far. Maybe if, you know, but that's not real either, because you're in a relationship with someone where you're feeling like, hold on, I also need to be heard in this scenario, and I also need to like stand up for myself. But did you ever find yourself feeling responsible for?
You know, it's such a great question, Lindsay. And I have to tell you, the truth is I never felt responsible for it. I never felt like I should have done more or done something differently. It was always really black and white to me that this was his problem and that it was in him. And I'm so fortunate in that I didn't blame myself. I did feel incredibly strongly that I wanted to help him and that I had led a more privileged life than he had and that I could heal him. And you know what? There's part of my instinct in that was right, because what you said, that the instinct to get to the 5-year-old boy and heal him is the right instinct. The problem in my logic was that he had to heal himself. He had to get to that 5-year-old boy himself and heal himself. I wasn't the one, and no partner, no woman is the one who could heal any of these men. They have to get professional help and group help and the help of other men who've been abused, honestly, and heal themselves and recognize that that's their problem. Because I couldn't heal him. There's no way. I wanted to. And I'm a strong, smart, capable woman, and trust me, I tried my best. I couldn't. I also want to touch on what you said about how messy the fights are. I'll tell you, the first 100 beatings, he just went after me. But I got really mad. And so when I felt one coming on, I was like, you know what, Leslie? You have one chance to get a punch in. And you better take it before he levels you. And my ex had a black belt in karate and a black sash in kung fu. He'd been a runner-up for his state's weightlifting championship. He was a very, very strong person. I think I never hurt him in any way, but it's like for my own self-esteem, I had to hit him sometimes because I had to say, no, you can't do this to me. It's not right. And it's one of the messy things. It's why police officers need to be so carefully educated about abuse, is that they could have easily seen me as the aggressor, as the police who called Gabby Petito the aggressor did. It's one of the problems. Or an equal
participant in the abuse,
we present as hysterical and emotional and out of control because we are. Yeah. It's the normal response.
Thank you for saying that. Oh my God, can you say it again? Thank you. Because your life is being fucked around with.
Right. And what if you have children and they're threatening the children? And what if this has gone on for 10 years?
Yeah.
And they've told you nobody's ever going to believe you. It's just, people don't judge us if you haven't been through this and you haven't really thought long and hard about what it's like to be an abuse victim. Don't judge us and don't try to intervene and don't try to help. The first thing you have to do to end this is to have some compassion and understand what victims go through. And also a little bit, you've got to understand what the perpetrator is after. Because this is not a normal relationship and you can't apply normal standards to it. From the very beginning, they are laying a trap for us because for two reasons. They want to dominate and control us because it makes them feel safe. But also every single abuser out there is terrified of abandonment. And they want to make sure we're so weak and so controlled by them that we can't leave them because that's their biggest fear. And the really complicated thing is that by abusing us, they guarantee that we're going to leave. They're either going to kill us and so we'll be gone, or we're going to walk out the door one day. And
oh my God,
it's just it's a tragedy. It really, really is. And I'm so lucky that I was able to leave. And
yes.
I think another thing that's really important to say is that I didn't enjoy the abuse. I wanted the abuse to end. I didn't want the relationship to end. And I have never repeated the pattern. And most victims are like me, that when we get out, we're like, no, I'm never doing that again. I will do anything to stay out of an abusive relationship. And the reason I say that is that it is motivation to help us. It's motivation for funding domestic violence shelters and hotlines and advocates and educating police and family court judges, because investing in abused women is a really good investment, helping us get out, helping us break the cycle of violence, helping us raise our kids in violence-free homes. It's a really worthy investment for any society, any town, any state, any government. It's worthwhile. And I'm a great example of this, and you are too. And walking around in broad daylight are millions of women like us who survived abuse when we were younger. And we're all in our own ways warriors to make sure that it doesn't happen to our kids and it doesn't happen to other women. And it doesn't happen to men too. There are men who are abused, and I see them on a regular basis, and I'm just as committed to helping them get out because they're just as trapped as I was.
These women, you, me, everybody that people have reached out to us, like total strangers that I have no idea, I've never met them, and they share these stories. And I'm like, if I printed all of these out and laid them on the floor, you wouldn't know wouldn't know that these were different people.
It's so true. So true. I have gotten so many emails where the headline has been something like, I think you were married to my ex-husband. Because it's like they all read the same playbook. You know, it's like they've all been trained. That's what makes me feel like there's actually a lot of hope in that, because it's kind of like you're discovering an illness that has 5 of the same symptoms, no matter who it afflicts. You know, they say the exact same things. They do the exact same things. And that makes it identifiable as a syndrome that we can study and defang and hopefully one day eradicate from the face of this earth.
Wow. I love that. That is so important. I hope that's going to sit so well with somebody who's, when they're ready to hear it,
Right.
when they're ready to listen,
Right.
they will have. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to ask you if you would give us one tool that our besties can put in their toolbox. Welcome back to this episode of Bitch is a Bad Word. We have your new BFF joining you. Leslie Morgan Steiner is here with our favorite closing question of what tool can you give our besties to put in their bestie toolkit?
So the tool that I have is what saved me and what saves every abuse survivor that I know. And it is simultaneously a really hard thing to do and a really easy thing to do, which is that you have to think of somebody who you trust and you have to tell them that you're being abused. And it's not an easy conversation to have. And you can't pussyfoot around or obfuscate. You have to say, he's hitting me. He's beating me. He's holding a loaded gun to my head. He's strangling me. I need your help. And just by breaking the silence, you're doing an incredibly powerful thing. But it has to be somebody who you trust, because it's incredibly important that that person believes you and respects you. And by respect, I mean they don't tell you what to do and they don't tell you that you have to leave, because you might not be ready to leave yet. But what saved me, I didn't leave my abusive husband for over 2 years after I confided in my 2 friends. And it was torture for them because they knew I was still being beaten. But I wasn't ready to leave. I needed to be sure that I was done, and I needed to leave in a way that it was as safe as possible. And it took a while to get my life in a place where I could leave. But the first step was reaching out and breaking the silence about abuse. And it's the way that we all help each other, is by owning. I don't want to say admitting, because there's no shame to it, but by just owning that, you know what, I fell in love with somebody who turned out to be abusive, and it wasn't my fault. And it wasn't exactly his fault either. It was his responsibility to not do it, but it wasn't his fault because he was a victim too. But I did that, and not ashamed of it. And I needed a lot of help to get out. I still need help a lot. And to just talk about it, to just talk about the reality of being human and the reality of being a woman today, and that it's so much harder than any of us have ever been led to believe. And also, I personally believe that the experience of being a woman is not survivable without the sisterhood of other women. And you're only going to tap into the power of that sisterhood if you tell your friends and family and colleagues and strangers on the airplane or on the beach or wherever you are about what you're really going through.
That is beautiful advice. I mean, you've just put the greatest tool in the bestie toolkit, because there is no safety in staying silent.
Right. No, it's the worst, most destructive thing that you can do, is to stay silent about any kind of abuse that you've been going through.
Wow. This is like such a powerful, inspiring, like I can't imagine just like listening when this is all out, what our listeners can hear and feel is like, it's resonating off of you. You are just a force, but you're soft and you're kind and you're a beautiful soul. You feel it just like through you. And
well, thank you so much, Lindsay. But don't you think you've just described every single survivor? We're all like this. We're all strong and smart and tough, but we're not hard. You know what? We're really, really sympathetic. So thank you for that compliment. I accept it, and I accept it on behalf of all survivors, because we're all just like this. You see my cat? You see my cat in the background?
No, we are. And it's like, and that's great. And that's like, and don't change.
Right. I know.
Don't
There's no reason to change. Just the thing you have to change, I think, is that you do have to put yourself first, and you have to vow to yourself that you're never going to let yourself be abused in any way again. And you have to begin the very difficult work of making better choices in partners, which for me, honestly, I'm going to turn 60 this year. I am still working on that. My friends are solid. They're so great, but I still pick partners who are not good partners. You know, they just aren't. And it can be a lifetime journey.
I love that clarity though, too. And I mean, we're trying to educate women, and like, we're trying to say, you know, like, what I want to say, I have a young daughter, as I told you, who's graduating college. And when I think about this show and the way that I hope that someone young is listening, because as you said, what is that age? It's 16 to 24.
3 times as likely.
24.
Yeah, you're 3 times as likely to be an abuse victim then.
That's a huge, like, you know nothing. Your parents are like, you don't know anything about the world. But you don't really. And you need to learn. And so I'm always like, hey, you don't need to get married in your 20s. Like, you're not, like, I'm done with this like spinster mentality. You like, and you can have babies at 50.
Right.
There's nothing. And they're like, you're going to, nothing. Don't stop this shit. And let's get you to a point where you're financially independent. You're solid in what you have seen the world a little bit. And please leave at the first red flag.
Right.
You don't have to be nice.
Right. You don't have to forgive. You don't have to be nice. And also this is a message that women don't get enough, what you just said before that, which is you got to invest in yourself in terms of your education and your economic independence. Because leaving is much easier then. And also living a great life is much easier then when you don't have to look for somebody else to help you out financially. And economic freedom is a priceless thing. And it's a message that men get a lot and that women don't get so much.
Yeah, the men are out there. And then, I mean, and going just really quickly, like, it's the woman who's usually taking off work to raise the kids and removing themselves from that place. So it's like, but if you can get to a position of power where you are financially independent, you understand, you can leave. I left with $40 in my wallet, and that was the dumbest thing that I later looked at. Like, I can't believe I let myself be in this position, but I naively believed that it would all work out, but it put me in such a horrible position, but also to be abused post-separation.
Right. Exactly.
So that's what we were just like, please, just young women listening, like baddies, like, just go, like, secure your future. And then the man that you attract, or your partner that you attract at that point, is probably the green flag guy.
Right. Yes. Much better. And if they're not, then you're stronger. It's like some of these things don't get better, Lindsay, but you get better. So you get a lot, you recognize these things a lot more quickly, and you get out a lot more quickly. Sometimes I think that's the real goal, is that we maybe will never eradicate abusive dynamics, but we can teach people to leave a lot faster. And that is a huge victory.
Yes, I love that. Oh.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. It's really been great.
Thank you. I want to invite you to my club. And it is the BFF Club, Bitches Fighting for Freedom.
That's wonderful. I gleefully accept.
And we're going to get all the bitches together for a big bitch summit, and we're like going to spread the message. And what an honor to speak to you.
Likewise. Really wonderful. Thank you for doing such good work. And I can't wait to listen to the final podcast.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And where can our besties find you?
I'm really easy to find. @Leslie Books is my website. That's also my social media handle. And I answer all my own emails. I'm really into connecting with other women. So come find me and let's start a conversation and a friendship.
It sounds like you're somebody a bestie could reach out to and be that trusted person.
Yes, and it happens to me all the time. I'm the person that people disclose abuse and sexual assault to, It's every day of my life I get those emails, and it's an honor to get them.
Well, thank you so much for everything that you're doing for the women around the world and men.
Yes. Thank you, Lindsay. Yep.
Thank you. And we'll speak to you soon.
Sounds great. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bitches being bad.